Part 4. Shattering the Divine Facade. The Prometheus Unbound had liberated 17 worlds by the time they reached the outskirts of the Ethon core systems. Each victory had taught them more about their enemy, and each freed population had joined their growing rebellion. The ship now carried representatives from dozens of species, all united in their determination to end the Ethon's reign. "Captain, we're approaching the Veil of Eternity," announced Navigator Torres, his voice tight with tension. "According to our new allies, this is where reality gets strange." Captain Rodriguez studied the tactical display. Ahead of them lay a region of space that defied all known laws of physics. Stars bent in impossible directions. Time flowed in loops, and space itself seemed to fold like origami. At the center of this chaos sat the Ethon throne world, Ethros Prime. "Sensor report," Rodriguez ordered. Dr. Chen looked up from her station, her face pale. "Captain, I'm reading massive dimensional distortions. The Ethon have essentially wrapped their homeworld in layers of folded spacetime. It exists partially outside our reality. Can we penetrate it? The conventional approach would be to match their dimensional frequency and phase through the barriers, but..." Chen paused, studying her readings. "Captain, I think we should do the opposite. Instead of trying to slip through their reality maze, we should force them to come to us." Before Rodriguez could ask what she meant, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. On the main screen, crystalline vessels materialized out of the dimensional folds. Not 3 ships this time, but hundreds. The entire Ethon fleet was emerging to defend their sacred realm. "Battle stations," Rodriguez commanded. "All hands prepare for combat." The Ethon fleet was a sight to behold. Crystal ships of every size and configuration formed perfect geometric patterns in space. At their center was a vessel so massive it dwarfed even the Prometheus Unbound. The flagship of the Collective, home to the High Eternal Zarthol himself. A communication request came through from the flagship. Rodriguez accepted it, and the bridge filled with Zarthol's presence. The Ethon leader had grown more solid since their first encounter, fed by the worship of billions. He towered over the human crew, his energy form crackling with barely contained power. "So the God-Killers arrive at last," Zarthol spoke, his voice carrying harmonic overtones that hurt to hear. "You have caused us considerable inconvenience, little humans. 17 worlds freed from our guidance. Millions of souls turned away from proper worship. But your journey ends here, does it?" Rodriguez replied calmly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like we've got you scared. Why else would you bring your entire fleet to deal with one human ship?" Zarthol's laughter was like the sound of breaking crystal. "Scared? We who have shaped the destiny of galaxies for eons. You amuse us, primitive. We brought our full might not from fear, but to ensure no trace of your corruption survives." "Corruption?" This time it was Rodriguez who laughed. "Is that what you call free will? The right to think for yourself?" "Free will is chaos," Zarthol declared. "The Ethon bring order to the universe. Under our guidance, species achieve their full potential. Without us, they would destroy themselves in endless wars and petty conflicts." "Like humanity did?" Rodriguez asked pointedly. "We've had our wars, sure, but we never needed false gods to tell us how to live." The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Chen's urgent voice. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildup across their fleet. They're preparing to fire." "All hands brace for impact," Rodriguez announced. "Mr. Parker, give me everything the engines have got." The Ethon fleet opened fire as one. Hundreds of reality-warping beams converged on the Prometheus Unbound. The human ship's shields flared and sparked under the assault, but the redundant systems held. Emergency lights flickered on the bridge, as the ship shook under impacts that would have erased entire planets. "Hull integrity down to 40%, reported Commander Park, but we're still in one piece." "Return fire. All weapons," Rodriguez ordered. The Prometheus Unbound's kinetic bombardment cannon spoke with thunder. Solid projectiles tore through the Ethon formations, their elegant crystal ships shattering under impacts they were never designed to withstand. The human ship had been built for one purpose: to survive long enough to deliver its ultimate weapon. "Dr. Chen, are you ready?" Rodriguez called over the noise of battle. Chen's hands flew over her controls. "Dimensional disruptors are charging, Captain. But I need you to get us closer to their flagship. The dimensional barriers around Ethros Prime are anchored to Zarthol's ship." Rodriguez gritted her teeth. Getting closer meant flying directly into the heaviest concentration of enemy fire. Mr. Torres, plot a course straight at that flagship. Full speed. Captain, that's suicide, Park protested. Maybe. But it's also the last thing they'll expect. The Prometheus Unbound accelerated toward the Ethan flagship, its armor ablating under concentrated fire. More crystal ships moved to intercept, but the human vessel's momentum carried it forward. In the depths of space, a battle was being fought that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Chen, I need those disruptors now, Rodriguez shouted as another section of hull armor vaporized. Almost ready, Captain. I'm detecting the dimensional anchor points. If I can collapse the barriers around their throne world, do it. Dr. Chen triggered the dimensional disruptors. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The folded space around Ethros Prime began to unravel like a cosmic tapestry coming undone. Reality reasserted itself with a violence that sent shockwaves through the entire system. The Ethon fleet found themselves suddenly vulnerable in normal space-time. Their reality-warping weapons, dependent on dimensional manipulation, began to fail. Zarthul's flagship, designed to exist partially outside reality, was caught between dimensions as the barriers collapsed. Impossible. Zarthul's voice filled with something the Ethan hadn't felt in millennia. Terror. Our eternal realm? You're destroying it. We're not destroying anything, Rodriguez replied as she watched Ethros Prime materialize fully in normal space. We're just making you play by the same rules as everyone else. The throne world was revealed in all its grotesque glory. What had appeared to be a paradise was actually a massive organic structure, fed by the life force of billions of enslaved beings. The planet itself was alive, a parasitic entity that existed by consuming the worship and energy of the Ethon subjects. My God, breathed Dr. Chen. It's not just their homeworld, it's their source of power. They're literally feeding off the life force of every being in their empire. The revelation changed everything. The Ethan weren't just tyrants. They were vampires on a galactic scale. Every prayer, every act of worship, every life sacrificed in their name fed the monstrous entity that was their throne world. Zarthul's ship began to crack as the dimensional barriers collapsed completely. The High Eternal himself was becoming more solid, more vulnerable. For the first time in his existence, he was trapped in normal space-time with no escape. You have doomed us all, he screamed. Without the Ethan to maintain order, the galaxy will tear itself apart. Then we'll help it rebuild, Rodriguez replied. Without gods, without masters, as equals. The Prometheus Unbound fired its remaining weapons at the exposed Ethros Prime. The planet entity writhed under the assault, its surface convulsing as the parasitic systems that drained energy from across the galaxy began to fail. Around them, the Ethon fleet began to dissolve. Without their dimensional advantages, the crystal ships were revealed as fragile constructs held together by will and worship. As their power source died, so did their technology. Zarthul made one final desperate attempt to maintain his divine status. His energy form blazed brighter than a star as he drew on the last reserves of power from his dying throne world. I am eternal, he declared. I am divine. I will not be defeated by primitives. No, Rodriguez said quietly. You're just another bully who forgot that no one stays on top forever, though. Prometheus Unbound's final kinetic strike pierced the heart of Ethros Prime. The planet entity's death scream echoed across the galaxy as 10,000 years of stolen power was released in a single, blinding explosion. When the light faded, the Ethon fleet was gone. Zarthul himself was nowhere to be found. All that remained was empty space and the Prometheus Unbound, battered but victorious. Captain, Chen reported, her voice filled with awe. I'm reading massive power surges from every tributary world. The control networks are failing across the entire galaxy. Rodriguez smiled as she watched the readings. On hundreds of worlds, billions of beings were waking up from a nightmare that had lasted for millennia. They were remembering what it meant to be free. Signal all the liberated worlds, she ordered. Tell them it's over. The gods are dead. Part 5. The End of Gods. 6 months after the destruction of Ethros Prime, Captain Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus Unbound and watched the most remarkable sight in galactic history. Ships from hundreds of worlds had gathered in the Nexus 7 system for the first Galactic Liberation Council. Former slaves were meeting as equals, working together to build a new future. It's beautiful, said Dr. Chen, joining Rodriguez at the viewport. Look at them all. 6 months ago, they were kneeling before false gods. Now they're designing a constitution for a free galaxy. Rodriguez nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. It's not over yet, Sarah. There are still Ethan survivors out there, and not everyone wants to give up the old ways. She was right to be cautious. Reports came in daily from across the galaxy. Some former tributary worlds had descended into chaos without their Ethon masters to maintain order. Others had been taken over by local warlords who saw opportunity in the power vacuum. Most disturbing of all, there were reports of surviving Ethon trying to rebuild their empire in remote sectors. "Captain," announced Commander Park from the bridge, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Vegan Republic. They say they've captured something we need to see." Rodriguez and Chen made their way to the bridge, where the main screen showed a delegation from one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. The Vegans were tall, graceful beings with silver skin and large, intelligent eyes. They had been among the first species enslaved by the Ethan, their advanced culture reduced to worshipping crystal spires for over 8,000 years. "Captain Rodriguez," spoke Ambassador Kethvar, the Vegan representative, "we bring grave news. Our scouts have discovered an Ethan survivor attempting to rebuild a control network in the Outer Rim. But this one is different. It claims to be reformed." The screen split to show a holding cell aboard a Vegan vessel. Inside, contained by force fields and quantum dampeners, sat a single Ethon. Unlike the towering energy beings they had fought before, this one appeared small and almost solid. It looked up at the camera with what might have been sorrow. "I am Voltar of the former collective," the Ethon spoke, its voice lacking the harmonic arrogance of its predecessors. "I wish to speak with the humans who ended our reign. I have information they need." Rodriguez studied the being carefully. "Put me through to him." The connection established, Voltar looked directly at Rodriguez through the view screen. "Captain Rodriguez, your name is known throughout what remains of our kind. You are called the God Killer, the one who shattered our eternal dream." "Our reign of terror, you mean?" Rodriguez replied coldly. "Yes," Voltar said, surprising everyone. "That is exactly what I mean. I have had 6 months to think clearly for the first time in millennia. Without the constant flow of worship to cloud my judgment, I see what we truly were. Parasites, tyrants, monsters who convinced ourselves we were bringing order to chaos." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "If you understand that, why are you trying to rebuild control networks?" Voltar's energy form flickered with what might have been shame. "Because there are others of my kind who do not share my own awakening. They believe the loss of our power is temporary. They are gathering in the Void Nebula, planning to reclaim their divine status by force." "Well, how many?" Rodriguez asked. "Perhaps 50 Ethans survived the destruction of Ethros Prime. Most fled to distant galaxies, but 12 remain here, led by Morduk the Undying. He was Zarthel's second in command and believes he can restore our empire by conquering worlds one by one." Ambassador Kethvar spoke up. "We have confirmed scout reports from the Void Nebula. Ships have gone missing in that region, and the few survivors speak of beings demanding worship in exchange for their lives." Rodriguez felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. The job wasn't finished. As long as any Ethon remained who believed they were gods, the galaxy would never be truly free. "Voltar," she said finally, "why should we trust you? How do we know this isn't some elaborate trap?" The former god's response was immediate and painful to watch. "Because I have seen what I truly am without the lies we told ourselves. We called our subjects blessed while we drained their life force. We spoke of guidance while we stole their thoughts. We claimed divinity while behaving like the worst kind of criminals." Voltar's form flickered again. "I cannot undo what I have done, Captain. But perhaps I can help prevent others of my kind from doing more harm." The debate continued for hours, involving representatives from dozens of worlds. Some wanted Voltar executed as a war criminal. Others believed his information was too valuable to ignore. In the end, it was a group of freed Ethon slaves who made the decision. Speaker Vextel, now representing the Nexus 7 coalition, addressed the council. "We who suffered under Ethan rule for generations have the right to decide. This Voltar speaks of regret and redemption. If he truly wishes to make amends, let him prove it by helping us stop those who would restore the old tyranny." And so, in one of the strangest alliances in galactic history, a former god joined the rebellion against his own kind. Voltar provided detailed intelligence about Ethon capabilities, weaknesses, and the location of Morduk's hidden base in the Void Nebula. The final battle was unlike anything that had come before. Where the fight at Ethros Prime had been a clash between different philosophies of existence, the confrontation in the Void Nebula was purely about survival. Morduk and his followers had abandoned all pretense of divine benevolence. They had become exactly what they truly were, predators seeking to dominate and consume. The combined fleet that entered the Void Nebula included ships from over 100 worlds. The Prometheus Unbound led the formation, its hull now bearing the scars of countless battles. Behind it came vessels of every size and design, crewed by beings who had learned the value of freedom. "Captain," Dr. Chen reported as they approached Morduk's stronghold, "I'm reading massive energy signatures. They've built some kind of artificial world in the heart of the nebula." The enemy base was revealed as a twisted mockery of the destroyed Ethros Prime. Morduk had taken asteroids, derelict ships, and the wreckage of destroyed worlds and fused them into a nightmarish structure. At its center, an artificial black hole served as a power source, fed by the life force of captured beings from across the galaxy. "Morduk is trying to become a god through force," Voltar explained from his position on the bridge. "He believes that if he can consume enough life energy, he can transcend physical existence entirely." The battle that followed was brief but decisive. The Allied fleet, fighting for something greater than themselves, overwhelmed the remaining Ethan forces. Morduk's fortress world cracked under bombardment from weapons designed by dozens of different species, each contributing their unique understanding of war and technology. In the end, Morduk himself faced Captain Rodriguez in single combat aboard his dying stronghold. The last of the self-proclaimed gods had grown massive by consuming countless lives, his energy form burning like a dark star. "You have doomed this galaxy to chaos, human," he snarled as they faced each other in the fortress's core chamber. "Without gods to guide them, the lesser species will destroy themselves within generations." "Maybe," Rodriguez replied, raising the portable dimensional disruptor Chen had designed for close combat. "But that'll be their choice to make. Free beings have the right to succeed or fail on their own. Freedom is an illusion," Morduk raged. "Order must be imposed. The strong must rule the weak." "No," Rodriguez said simply. "The strong must protect the weak. That's what separates civilization from tyranny." The disruptor fired, and the last self-proclaimed god of the galaxy died screaming defiance into the void. 2 years later, Rodriguez stood once again on the observation deck of the Prometheus Unbound, now serving as the flagship for the Galactic Freedom Coalition. The ship was heading home to Earth, its mission finally complete. "Any regrets, Captain?" asked Dr. Chen, who had become the Coalition's chief science advisor. Rodriguez considered the question as she watched the stars wheel past. The galaxy was still healing from 10,000 years of oppression. Some worlds had embraced democracy and cooperation. Others had chosen different paths. There had been conflicts, misunderstandings, and occasional violence as hundreds of species learned to interact as equals. But there was also wonder. Art, science, and philosophy were flourishing as minds freed from mental bondage explored new ideas. Trade and cultural exchange were creating connections between worlds that had been isolated for millennia. Children were growing up on 1,000 worlds without ever bowing to false gods. "No regrets," Rodriguez said finally. "We did what we came to do. We ended the age of gods and gave the galaxy a chance to choose its own future." As Earth grew larger on the view screen, Rodriguez thought about Voltar, who had chosen to remain in exile on a remote world, spending his remaining existence trying to help former slaves heal from their trauma. She thought about the billions of beings across the galaxy who were learning what it meant to be free. Most of all, she thought about the simple truth that had driven humanity to challenge beings who called themselves gods. No one, no matter how powerful, had the right to steal another being's freedom to choose their own destiny. The age of gods was over. The age of freedom had begun. 3 months had passed since the Zelkari fleet arrived in human space. Admiral Vextar stood in his command center, reviewing reports from the occupation forces now stationed around Earth. The conquest had proceeded exactly as planned. The human government had formally surrendered, and Zelkari troops now controlled all major population centers on the planet's surface. "Sir, the resource extraction operations are ahead of schedule," reported his logistics officer. "The humans are very cooperative." They've provided detailed maps of all mineral deposits and manufacturing facilities. The Admiral nodded with satisfaction. The humans had proven to be model subjects, eager to please their new rulers and quick to adapt to Zelkari authority. There had been some scattered resistance from small groups using improvised explosive devices, but nothing that Zelkari security forces couldn't handle easily. "What about the human space fleet?" he asked. "Completely neutralized, sir. All 12 of their ships have been captured intact. Our technical teams are studying their primitive propulsion systems." Admiral Vextar allowed himself a moment of pride. This had been one of the smoothest conquests in Zelkari history. The humans had offered no real resistance. Their technology was centuries behind Zelkari standards, and their planet was rich with valuable resources. High Command would be very pleased with his performance, but his satisfaction was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Fleet Command Center. "Sir, we have a priority message from Admiral Kreltos of the 6th Fleet," his communication officer announced. "It's marked as urgent." Admiral Vextar accepted the transmission, expecting routine congratulations on his successful conquest. Instead, he saw the worried face of a fellow commander who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Vextar, we have a serious problem," Admiral Kreltos said without preamble. "Ships are disappearing throughout our territory. Not destroyed. Vanishing completely." "What do you mean, vanishing?" Admiral Vextar asked. "No distress signals, no wreckage, no witnesses. One moment they're on patrol, the next moment they're simply gone. We've lost 16 ships in the past 2 weeks, including the heavy cruiser Bone Crusher and the battle carrier Deathswing." Admiral Vextar felt cold dread settling in his stomach. Those were powerful warships with experienced crews. They couldn't just disappear without explanation. "Do you have any idea what's causing these disappearances?" he asked. "That's the strangest part," Admiral Kreltos continued. "Every ship we've lost had recently visited or conquered one of those primitive worlds. The pattern is too clear to be coincidence." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Vextar staring at a blank screen. He immediately ordered his intelligence staff to investigate similar disappearances throughout Zelkari space. What they found made his worst fears seem optimistic. Over the past month, 47 Zelkari ships had vanished without trace. Every single one had been involved in the conquest or occupation of a supposedly primitive world. The disappearances were happening across thousands of light years, affecting multiple fleets and patrol groups. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we're receiving an emergency transmission from the patrol ship Predator's Claw. They report contact with unknown vessels." The main screen activated, showing the panicked face of Captain Zorkon aboard his patrol cruiser. Behind him, his bridge crew worked frantically at their stations while alarm sirens wailed. "Admiral, we are under attack by unidentified ships," the captain shouted. They appeared from nowhere. Our sensors showed empty space one moment, then suddenly there were 5 vessels closing on our position. "What do the ships look like?" Admiral Vextar demanded. "They're like nothing in our database, sir." "Black hulls that seem to absorb our sensor beams. No energy signatures we can identify. They're using weapons that phase through our shields as if they don't exist." The transmission began breaking up as the Predator's Claw took heavy damage. Through the static, Admiral Vextar caught glimpses of the attacking vessels, sleek, dark shapes that moved with impossible grace through space. Their weapons produced no visible beams or projectiles, but wherever they struck, Zelkari armor simply ceased to exist. "Captain, can you identify the species?" the Admiral asked urgently. "Negative, sir. They're not responding to any communication attempts. Wait, something's happening to our hull. It's like the metal is just dissolving wherever their weapons hit us." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only static. Admiral Vextar ordered immediate attempts to re-establish contact, but the Predator's Claw had vanished from all sensors. Where a powerful Zelkari warship had been moments before, space was completely empty. "Get me a direct channel to High Command," the Admiral ordered. "Priority Alpha." While he waited for the connection, his mind raced through the implications. The attacking ships had technology far beyond anything in Zelkari databases. They could appear and disappear at will. Their weapons could penetrate any known shielding, and they were specifically targeting ships that had conquered primitive worlds. The connection to High Command established, and Admiral Vextar found himself speaking directly to Supreme Commander Thraknul, the highest military authority in the Zelkari Empire. "Supreme Commander, we have a crisis situation," he began, then quickly summarized the pattern of disappearances and the attack on the Predator's Claw. Supreme Commander Thraknal listened in growing alarm. "Admiral, I'm authorizing immediate recall of all fleets to defensive positions around our core worlds. We're dealing with an unknown enemy who may represent a threat to the entire Empire." But even as the Supreme Commander spoke, reports were flooding in from across Zelkari space. The mysterious black ships were appearing simultaneously in dozens of star systems, attacking Zelkari vessels with devastating efficiency. Within hours, over 100 ships had been destroyed or had simply vanished. The pattern became clear as more reports arrived. The attackers were hitting every location where the Zelkari had conquered a primitive world. But they weren't just attacking randomly. They seemed to know exactly where every Zelkari ship was located, what its capabilities were, and how to destroy it most efficiently. Admiral Vextar realized with growing horror that his fleet in human space might be next. He immediately ordered all ships to maximum alert status and began recalling his scattered vessels to defensive positions around Earth. "Sir," his communication officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human government on Earth's surface." "Put it through," the Admiral ordered, wondering what the primitive humans could possibly want at a time like this. Ambassador Williams appeared on the screen, but something about him had changed. His previous nervous demeanor was gone, replaced by a calm confidence that made Admiral Vextar's skin crawl. "Admiral Vextar," Williams began, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." "What do you mean?" the Admiral asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. "The ships that have been attacking your forces throughout the galaxy, they're not unknown aliens, Admiral. They're human ships." Admiral Vextar stared at the screen in disbelief. "That's impossible. Your species barely has spaceflight capability." Williams smiled, and for the first time, Admiral Vexitar saw something predatory in the human's expression. "That's what we wanted you to think. The truth is humanity has been spacefaring for over 3 centuries. We've been watching the Zelkari Empire for longer than you've known we existed." The Admiral felt reality shifting around him. Everything he thought he knew about the human conquest was wrong. Every world you've conquered in the past century that you classified as primitive, they were all human colonies, Williams continued. "We've been maintaining the illusion of weakness while studying your tactics, mapping your territory and preparing for this moment. But your technology," the Admiral protested weakly. "Your ships, your weapons, their primitive chemical systems. On the surface, yes. We made sure that's all you would see, but our real technology is somewhat more advanced than yours." As if to demonstrate, Williams gestured toward the viewport behind the Admiral. Admiral Vextar turned to look and gasped in shock. The space around Earth, which had been empty moments before, was now filled with hundreds of sleek black ships. They had appeared without warning, without any sensor detection, as if they had simply materialized from nothing. "How?" he whispered. "We've had a long time to prepare," Williams replied. "Every primitive species you've encountered has been gathering intelligence on your capabilities. We know the location of every major Zelkari facility, the specifications of every ship class, and the tactical preferences of every commander. We've been preparing for this war longer than most of your officers have been alive." Admiral Vexistar looked around his command center, seeing his crew's faces filled with the same shock and disbelief he felt. The greatest military force in the galaxy had been completely fooled by what they thought was a primitive species. "What do you want?" he asked. "Surrender," Williams replied simply. "Your fleet, your weapons, and a complete cessation of all Zelkari military operations. In return, we'll allow your crews to return home alive." "And if we refuse?" Williams' expression didn't change, but something cold entered his voice. "Then you'll discover why every other Zelkari fleet that refused our terms simply stopped existing." Supreme Commander Thraknal stood in the emergency command center deep beneath the Zelkari homeworld, watching in horror as reports flooded in from across the Empire. The holographic display showed red zones spreading like a plague across Zelkari space, each one marking a system where their fleets had been destroyed or forced to surrender. "Sir, we've lost contact with Admiral Vextar's entire fleet in human space," reported his chief of staff. "The last transmission indicated they were surrendering to avoid total destruction." "How many ships have we lost in total?" the Supreme Commander asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Over 800 vessels confirmed destroyed or missing, sir. Another 300 have surrendered to human forces. We've had to abandon 17 conquered worlds and our supply lines are completely disrupted." Thraknal stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In less than a week, the mighty Zelkari Empire had been reduced to defending its core worlds against an enemy they had thought was primitive. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were systematically dismantling Zelkari power across the galaxy. "How is this possible?" he muttered. "Our intelligence reports clearly showed that humans were a young species with basic technology." His intelligence director, Admiral Keth Val, approached with a thick data tablet. "Sir, we've been analyzing the pattern of human attacks. What we've discovered is disturbing." "Explain." "The humans aren't fighting like any species we've encountered before. They seem to know exactly where our ships are at all times, even our most classified patrol routes. They strike with perfect coordination across thousands of light years simultaneously. Most importantly, they appear to have been planning this offensive for decades, possibly centuries." Admiral Kethaval activated a holographic display showing human ship movements. "Look at this attack pattern on our 6th Fleet. The human ships arrived at precisely the right coordinates to catch our vessels during a routine formation change. They knew our tactical manual better than our own commanders." Supreme Commander Thraknal studied the display with growing unease. "What are you suggesting?" "I believe the humans have been observing our military operations for much longer than we realized. Every primitive world we've conquered in the past century may have been a human intelligence-gathering operation." The Supreme Commander's blood turned cold. If that was true, then humanity had been playing a game spanning generations while the Zelkari thought they were simply conquering weak civilizations. "Sir," another officer interrupted, "we're receiving a communication request from the human fleet in the Kolvax system. They're requesting immediate surrender of all Zelkari forces in that sector." "Patch it through," Thraknal ordered. The main screen activated, showing a human officer in a black uniform standing on the bridge of one of their mysterious ships. The human looked remarkably calm for someone in the middle of a galactic war. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Navy," the human said. "I'm contacting you to offer terms for the immediate surrender of all Zelkari military forces." "This is Supreme Commander Thraknal of the Zelkari Empire," he replied, trying to project authority, despite his empire's desperate situation. "By what right do you demand our surrender?" Captain Chen's expression remained neutral. "By the right of superior force and the justice of our cause. Your empire has spent the past century conquering peaceful civilizations and enslaving their populations. That ends today." "The galaxy operates by the law of strength," Thraknal protested. "The strong rule the weak. This is natural order." "Perhaps," Chen replied. "In which case you should appreciate that humanity has proven stronger than your empire." The Supreme Commander looked around his command center, seeing his staff watching the conversation with expressions of fear and defeat. The human was right. In barely a week, humanity had demonstrated military superiority that made Zelkari power look insignificant. "What are your terms?" he asked. "Complete withdrawal of all Zelkari forces to your original territory, release of all conquered populations and return of their stolen resources, acceptance of human oversight for all future Zelkari military operations, and full reparations to the civilizations your empire has destroyed." "Those terms would mean the end of the Zelkari Empire as we know it," Thraknal said. "Yes," Captain Chen agreed. "That's exactly what they mean." The transmission ended, leaving the Zelkari command center in stunned silence. Supreme Commander Thraknal stared at the blank screen, realizing that his empire's reign of terror was over. "Sir," Admiral Kethaval said quietly, "we need to understand what we're really dealing with. I recommend we interrogate some of the prisoners from our conquered worlds. If the humans have been placing agents throughout our empire, we need to know the extent of their infiltration." An hour later, Thraknal stood in the interrogation chamber watching as his security officers questioned a captured human from one of the conquered worlds. The prisoner was a middle-aged woman who had been working as a translator in the Zelkari administration. "Tell us about human military capabilities," the interrogator demanded. The woman looked up with tired eyes. "You still don't understand, do you? You think this was some kind of sudden military buildup? You have no idea how long we've been preparing for this." "How long?" Thraknal asked, stepping forward. "Earth was never our homeworld," she said simply. "It was our nursery. A single planet where we practiced appearing primitive while our real civilization spread across the galaxy." The Supreme Commander felt the room spinning around him. "What do you mean?" Humanity has been spacefaring for over 600 years. We've established colonies in 47 different star systems, most of them hidden from galactic civilization. The primitive worlds you've been conquering were research stations where we studied aggressive species like yours. That's impossible, Admiral Kethval protested. Our sensors would have detected large-scale human colonization. The woman laughed bitterly. Your sensors see exactly what we want them to see. We've been using cloaking technology for 3 centuries. Every time you thought you were discovering a new primitive species, you were actually finding one of our research colonies studying you. Supreme Commander Thrakenal sank into a chair as the full scope of humanity's deception became clear. How many species in the galaxy are actually human colonies? 17 civilizations that you've classified as primitive were actually human research stations. Each one was studying a different aggressive species, gathering intelligence and preparing for the day when we would need to act. Why? He asked. Why go to such elaborate lengths? The woman's expression hardened. Because the galaxy had a problem. 17 different empires that believed might made right, that conquest was natural, that weaker species existed to be harvested. You made yourselves our problem. So you studied us like laboratory animals, Admiral Kethval said with disgust. Yes. For over a century, we watched you destroy civilizations, enslave populations, and spread suffering across the galaxy. We cataloged your weapons, learned your tactics, and prepared countermeasures for every aspect of your military doctrine. Supreme Commander Thrakenal understood now why human attacks had been so devastatingly effective. They hadn't been fighting an enemy. They had been exterminating a pest that they had studied for generations. What happens now? He asked. Now you learn to live in a galaxy where aggression has consequences, the woman replied. The other empires are receiving the same treatment you are. The Krex hegemony fell yesterday. The Vorthak Dominion surrendered this morning. The Stellar Confederation is negotiating terms. The interrogator looked shocked. All of them? Simultaneously? We've been planning this operation for over 200 years. Every aggressive civilization in the galaxy is being neutralized at the same time. This isn't a war, it's pest control. Supreme Commander Thrakenal felt the weight of defeat settling on his shoulders. The Zelkari Empire, which had considered itself the greatest military power in the galaxy, had been outmaneuvered by a species they thought was primitive. Sir, his communication officer called out, we're receiving surrender requests from our remaining fleet commanders throughout the Empire. They're reporting that human forces are offering safe passage home in exchange for immediate withdrawal from all conquered territories. Thrakenal looked around his command center one last time, seeing the faces of officers who had believed in Zelkari superiority. That belief had been shattered forever. Send a message to all Zelkari forces, he ordered. Full withdrawal to home territory. Accept human terms. The war is over. As his officers began transmitting the surrender orders, Supreme Commander Thrakenal realized that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had revealed itself as the true apex predator, and every other species would now have to live under their oversight. The age of conquest was over, and the age of human dominance had begun. 6 months after the first human ship had revealed itself, Ambassador Sarah Chen walked into the emergency session of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber, which had once echoed with the confident voices of conquering empires, was now filled with the subdued murmurs of defeated civilizations. Representatives from 17 different species sat around the circular table, each one a former military power that had been humbled by humanity's swift and decisive action. The Zelkari delegation huddled together, their once proud bearing replaced by nervous glances. The Krex representatives sat in complete silence, still struggling to understand how their perfect military machine had been dismantled in 3 days. Ambassador Chen took her seat at the table, representing the newest member of the Galactic Council, the Terran Federation. Unlike the other delegates, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone whose civilization had just reshaped the galaxy according to its will. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's translation systems. I know this has been a difficult transition period for many of your civilizations. Supreme Commander Thrakenal, now serving as the civilian representative for what remained of the Zelkari government, spoke first. Ambassador Chen, our people are struggling to understand the new arrangements. Your military forces have occupied every strategic position in our territory, but they've made no demands for tribute or resources. What does humanity want from us? Ambassador Chen smiled, and several delegates shifted uncomfortably. They had learned to be wary of human expressions of satisfaction. We want peace, she replied simply. Genuine, lasting peace throughout the galaxy. No more conquest wars. No more enslaved populations. No more civilizations destroyed for the entertainment of military empires. And you'll enforce this peace through military occupation? Asked Admiral Kreldos of the Vorthak Dominion. If necessary, Chen confirmed. Though we prefer cooperation to coercion. Your civilizations have a choice. Adapt to the new galactic order voluntarily, or have it imposed upon you. Former Supreme Admiral Zexkar of the Stellar Confederation leaned forward. Ambassador, with respect. Your species has just conquered 17 interstellar empires simultaneously. How do we know you won't simply become the next galactic tyrants? Chen activated a holographic projector, displaying a star map of the known galaxy. Red zones marked the former territories of the conquered empires, while blue zones showed the locations of peaceful civilizations that humanity had been protecting in secret. This may surprise you, she said, but conquering the galaxy was never our goal. For the past 3 centuries, humanity has been working to protect peaceful species from aggressive empires like yours. The blue zones represent 43 civilizations that we've been shielding from discovery by your scouts. The delegates stared at the map in amazement. The blue zones covered nearly half the galaxy, representing species and territories they had never known existed. You've been hiding entire civilizations from us? Thraknal asked. We've been protecting them, Chen corrected. Each of these civilizations was classified by our analysts as peaceful and non-threatening. We've been using our cloaking technology to keep them hidden, while they developed their own cultures and technologies without interference. She changed the display to show human ship positions throughout the galaxy. Our military forces aren't occupying your territories to control them. They're positioned to prevent future aggression while these protected civilizations are revealed and integrated into galactic society. Admiral Kreldos studied the display carefully. You're saying there are 43 advanced civilizations that we never knew about? 43 that were already advanced when we found them, Chen replied. We estimate there are over 200 more species in various stages of development that will eventually join galactic civilization. Our job is to ensure they can do so safely. The implications were staggering. The galaxy was far more crowded and diverse than the military empires had ever imagined. Humanity had been conducting the largest protection operation in galactic history, while maintaining the illusion of being a primitive species. Why reveal all this now? Asked the Krex representative. Because the threats to galactic peace have been neutralized, Chen explained. Your empires represented the only significant military forces capable of large-scale conquest. With your fleets destroyed or surrendered, the peaceful species can finally emerge from hiding. She activated another display showing construction projects throughout human space. We're already beginning the process of integration. New trade routes are being established, cultural exchange programs are starting, and we're sharing technology with species that demonstrate peaceful intentions. Supreme Commander Thraknal looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of former military leaders who were struggling to adapt to a galaxy where force was no longer the primary means of advancement. What about our people? He asked. The Zelkari have been a military society for over 1,000 years. How do we adapt to this new reality? That's up to you, Chen replied. We won't force any changes to your internal government or culture, but we will prevent external aggression. If the Zelkari want to maintain a strong military, that's your choice as long as it's used only for defense. And if some of our people can't accept these limitations? Asked Admiral Kreldos. Chen's expression became more serious. Then they'll discover why we've been so successful at maintaining galactic peace. Our monitoring systems are very comprehensive, and our response times are quite rapid. As if to demonstrate her point, she activated a final display showing the current positions of human ships throughout the galaxy. There were thousands of them, positioned at strategic points that would allow them to respond to any threat within hours. You've militarized the entire galaxy, observed the Krex representative. We've stabilized the entire galaxy, Chen corrected. For the first time in recorded history, a small civilization doesn't have to fear discovery by a larger one. Scientific development can proceed without the constant threat of conquest. Trade can flourish without the risk of piracy or territorial disputes. She stood up from her chair, addressing the assembled delegates directly. Gentlemen, your empires spent centuries proving that military might couldn't create lasting peace. You conquered worlds, enslaved populations, and destroyed civilizations, but the galaxy remained chaotic and dangerous. Humanity has achieved in 6 months what your combined fleets couldn't accomplish in 1,000 years. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed the magnitude of what humanity had accomplished. They had been so focused on their own military ambitions that they had never considered the possibility of genuine galactic peace. What happens next? Threcknell asked finally. Next you adapt, Chen replied. Your people learn to find purpose and meaning in creation rather than destruction. Your scientists focus on discovery rather than weapons development. Your traders explore new markets rather than new conquests. She walked toward the chamber's exit, then paused to address them one final time. The galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place. 43 new civilizations will be joining galactic society over the next year. Each one brings unique technologies, cultures, and perspectives that will benefit everyone. And humanity? Asked Admiral Kreldos. What role will your species play in this new galactic order? Chen smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in her expression. We'll continue doing what we've always done, protecting those who can't protect themselves and ensuring that the strong don't prey upon the weak. The difference is that now we can do it openly. As she left the chamber, the former military leaders sat in contemplative silence. The galaxy they had known was gone forever, replaced by something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization powerful enough to enforce peace and wise enough to use that power responsibly. Outside the council chamber, Ambassador Chen walked to an observation deck overlooking the station's busy docking bay. Ships from dozens of species were arriving and departing, beginning the process of building new relationships in a galaxy finally free from the threat of conquest. Her communication device chimed with a message from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. New signals had been detected from beyond the galactic rim, more aggressive species approaching from distant galaxies, drawn by the electromagnetic emissions of galactic civilization. Chen read the report with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the council session. Humanity had been preparing for external threats even longer than they had been dealing with internal ones. The approaching alien fleets would find the galaxy much better defended than they expected. She activated her communicator and sent a single message to the Terran Defense Command. Phase 3 protocols are now authorized. Across the galaxy, hidden human installations began powering up weapon systems that made the technology used against the Zelkari look primitive by comparison. The galaxy had learned what human protection looked like when dealing with internal threats. Soon, it would discover what human defense looked like when facing external ones. The age of conquest was over, but the age of protection had only just begun.